Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here. My name is Ateem Oti. I'm the Director for the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs for the City and County of Denver. I am joined today by my colleague, Claudia Castillo.
Hi, I'm Claudia Castillo. I'm the Language Access Coordinator, and again, thank you very much for attending the training.
And so today we're going to be talking about language access. And today's specific training is about the language access toolkit that the language access coordinator, as well as others in my office, have developed. Now, where does this conversation start and where does it come from? Language access is something that my predecessor, as well as others in HRCP, Human Rights and Community Partnerships, have been discussing for quite some time. In addition, the Immigrant and Refugee Affairs Commission has also been recommending to the mayor for a language access program to be started. And this was back in 2015. So we are super excited that we have finally been able to secure a language access coordinator to facilitate a deep dive into city services and programming to better understand what tools we can offer to city agencies and offices around language access. Next slide, please. So today you will see that we have a very robust agenda. And please note that we have not included the toolkit with your materials for today. We wanted to really make sure that you had time to walk through with us and ask any questions. We'll also be developing a fact sheet after this training that will be sent out as well. So any questions that are asked during the training will be included in that fact sheet, but we'll also send out the actual toolkit. But you can see here today that we're going to be going over quite a number of topics: terms and definitions, language access regulations, the inclusion of American Sign Language, what is a language access program, why do we want a toolkit, what is a language access plan, what is the FourFactor analysis, what are the City and County of Denver thresholds, what is a vital document, and what does it mean to develop agency and office language access plans? What does all of this training mean for agencies and offices within Denver, and what is our way forward? Next slide, please. So to start off with, we're going to listen to a video. And in this video, you will hear the former Houston police chief, who is now in Miami, have a conversation with a local English-speaking reporter and a reporter from Telemundo, which is a large Spanish-speaking media company here in the United States. Please play the video.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think you're the only one that has a right to know what's going on here? What's the problem? How many Hispanics are here that speak Spanish?
I don't. In the city?
Yeah, a lot.
Good many.
Telemundo, what's the number one? Okay, let me talk to the biggest audience I need to worry about right now that has just as much of a right to know what's going on, because we police and serve everybody.
Can we play that video one more time, please?
Let me ask you a question. Do you think you're the only one that has a right to know what's going on here? What's the problem? How many Hispanics are here that speak Spanish?
I don't. In the city?
Yeah, a lot.
Good many.
Telemundo, what's the number one? Okay, let me talk to the biggest audience I need to worry about right now that has just as much of a right to know what's going on, because we police and serve everybody.
So the reason why we played that video is we really wanted to share just how passionate and just how important language access is for all Denver residents, regardless of their language, English-speaking ability. And we really felt like that video captured what we as folks who work and represent the city and county of Denver should strive for. This police chief was very expressive about how important it is that we represent everyone and not just specific individuals based on their language ability. To bring that back and that conversation and the sentiment back to Denver, I just wanted to briefly share an experience that I had around language access when I was activated into the Emergency Operations Center in March of 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to this type of an emergency, I, in my role as an access and functional needs coordinator, was charged with making sure that individuals that did not speak English had an ability to understand the public health order information that was going out. This is a little bit different than the focus group that we'll talk about. So the individuals that I was needing to make sure that we were accounting for was anyone who spoke another language. That can sometimes also mean that that person speaks English, but they also speak another language. And that was important because of the pandemic and the immediacy that we needed to get information out. I needed to make sure that I was able to get information out to individuals, not only who might not speak English, but also those who speak English and a different language so they could pass on this information. That's a little bit different than what we're going to talk about today. Today's focus is going to be on individuals who consider themselves limited English proficient. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that definition means quickly here. But essentially, those are individuals who would determine that they do not speak English or cannot communicate at a certain level to effectively communicate with the city and their agencies. So I think what we really felt during the pandemic and because of the pandemic and still continue to feel as a result of the pandemic is the immediate need for all residents to understand information, not only public health orders, how to access vaccine information, testing information, information about resources that individuals might need, be it housing, be it access to internet. And so I want and I hope that this training will really help individuals to understand, but also to effectively come up with strategies to communicating with our residents and not having language as a barrier. So some terms and definitions that you'll continue to hear throughout the training. Language access, what does that mean? These are effective strategies to engage and communicate with residents. And really we're acknowledging that language is not going to be a barrier. A language access plan, a document that spells out how to provide services to individuals who are non-English speaking or have limited English proficiency. Limited English proficient, and this is what I refer to as LEP. This is a person with limited English proficiency that is unable to speak, read, write, or understand the English language at a level that permits them to interact effectively with the city and its agencies. Next slide, please. Meaningful access. This is the standard that we are trying to strive for. We want to be able to provide accurate, timely, and effective access to agency, office, programs, benefits, or services to LEP residents at no cost. This might take on the form of written translations or oral interpretation or a combination of both. Effective communication. This is a term that's used for individuals who have communication disabilities. And the goal here is to ensure that communication with people with vision, hearing, or speech disabilities is equally effective as communicating with individuals without disabilities. What is a vital document? And I know a lot of you will want to understand what vital documents are. And we want to make sure that you also understand the ask is not to translate every single document that you have that has to do with the program, benefit, or service that's federally funded or that interacts with the public. Vital documents are going to be those documents that provide essential information for accessing basic city services or benefits that you provide. Next slide. So where do these regulations come from? Why do we have to engage in language access and provide meaningful access? The Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VI, and you all probably might hear Title VI used very generally, but it comes from the Civil Rights Act. It prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin, and that includes individuals with limited English proficiency. You cannot discriminate against these individuals in any program or activity that receives federal funds or other federal financial assistance. And that financial assistance could be as a sub-awardee, as a partial federal funded grant. So it encompasses a lot of different federal forms of funding. It requires recipients of this federal assistance to take reasonable steps to provide that meaningful access to programs, services, and activities for LEP residents. There's also some additional guidance through an Executive Order 131666 that directs federal agencies to provide federal assistant agencies draft LEP guidance that for recipients for a federal financial assistance. So later on, you'll see there's a link to a website that has each federal agency has developed LEP guidance specific to that agency. So if you receive federal funding from Department of Labor, Department of Transportation, you can go onto this website and find out what are the specific requirements that those agencies have for you as a recipient of that federal financial assistance. Next slide. So what happens if an agency is not in compliance? Well, we hope that that doesn't happen to any of us, because we're going to be using this toolkit to produce and implement a language access plan. But what does happen? That process is governed by the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Office. We currently in our office, or our agency, our city, we have a complaint process that is administered through the Anti-Discrimination Office, Director Darius Smith. He is our point of contact. So if individuals had a complaint that they wanted to file based on the Title VI compliance requirements, they could file it with the Anti-Discrimination Office. If an individual or an agency or an office is not compliant, the Department of Justice can come in and ask for you to take specific steps to get into compliance. They can also ask for either suspension or termination of federal funding, or put you actually into legal proceedings. And we've actually seen most recently the Colorado court system here in Colorado has just entered into a voluntary settlement agreement with the Department of Justice for language access purposes. Next slide. So safe harbor guidelines. I want to talk a little bit about safe harbor, because you're going to see safe harbor come up as we get into the specific languages that are going to be used for the city and county of Denver have been identified. So what does safe harbor mean? The federal government has given certain guidelines that, if followed, would be considered strong evidence of compliance with a recipient's written translation obligations. And again, it's important to understand this is only for written translation obligations. If oral interpretation is required due to the type of program or service you're providing, this does not impact that requirement where needed and if it's reasonable. So what is the safe harbor guideline? It provides that written translation, again, of only vital documents for each eligible LEP language group that constitutes 5% or 1,000, whichever is less, of a population should be done. We have decided to go with 1,000 persons who have been determined as LEP for the city and county of Denver. And these would be individuals who are either eligible to be served, likely to be affected, or encountered. And I do want to stress those three words that I've highlighted: served, affected, or encountered. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if you've never served this person before, you don't have an obligation to try to serve them. It is someone who might be, again, affected or could be encountered or is actually being served. So it really requires a thorough analysis to determine exactly who might actually benefit from this program, activity, service, and am I reaching that individual who is LEP? Next slide. So the inclusion of American Sign Language. We did want to mention and highlight here that it is important to understand that Title II of the American Disabilities Act requires state and local government services to provide effective communication, that is the standard, for individuals with communication disabilities. The Office of Sign Language Services, as well as the Division of Disability Rights, has produced an access statement that must be included on all public-facing outreach materials. This statement is included in your toolkit, so please make sure to use that. This is a requirement under federal law that goes even above what the language access, meaningful access requirement provides under the Civil Rights Act. And so it's really important to understand that even though American Sign Language is not a spoken language, it still is a language that is included in language access. Next slide, please. So what is a language access program? A language access program sets standards, operating principles, as well as guidelines that govern the planning, implementation, and delivery of language access services. What we hope to do is this program is going to be designed to help you all as agencies and offices, as well as your staff, with your obligation to ensure meaningful access for LEP residents. Next slide. So I wanted to just remind everyone a little bit about a survey that was done back in December of 2019. So this survey was done by frontline staff of 500, which we received 587 responses over 29 agencies, and then their managers. So that was 207 managers over 24 agencies. And what the survey came back, and some of the results that we found were that all channels of communication are being used: telephonic, in-person, writing, or digital. And I use the word widget, but it's Google Translate. The City and County of Denver also has a specific widget that can translate information. The point here that I want to stress is most agencies and offices will likely need a mix of both oral translation, oral interpretation and written translation materials based on, again, the analysis that we're going to walk through. Some of the most impactful tools that we hope to support your office and agencies with are a support team through the Language Access Program for translation and interpretation needs, but then also access to some sort of internal web portal with resources that will help you all to be able to communicate and effectively implement your language access plans. Next slide, please. So we're going to watch another video here, and I want you to just think about, if you are watching this video for the first time, think about how individuals who interact in our city may feel when they're not able to communicate or speak the language. Play the video, please.
Doctor on Agritio. Tandoro.
Excuse me, sir. I'm so sorry. Look, she's been crying nonstop. She has a temperature of 105. I don't know what to do.
Maravidig. Vi paroles lesant.
No, please. Just every time I feed her, she throws up. I don't know.
Vi paroles
I don't understand what you're saying. What are you saying? Can you just look at her? No, she's burning up. Just feel.
You paroles la anglan.
What? She's burning up. Feel her head.
Tranquilli, kananje. The Monday is Askan.
What is he doing?
do you have?
My baby, she's got a temperature of 105. Every time I feed her, she throws up. Please, just, can you...
Tienes que levar temperátura.
She's burning up. Feel her head.
More rapid.
Please, just feel her head. Feel her head. Just someone let me in to see the doctor. No, does anyone understand what I'm saying? Please, someone help me.
8% of U.S. citizens speak limited English. For these 25 million Americans, professional interpreters can mean the difference between life and death.
So I know that was a really challenging video to watch, but I do want to stress that I think it does a really good job of expressing just how frustrating it is for individuals who need assistance and aren't able to communicate to get that assistance. Be it housing, be it information about the internet, again, due to this pandemic, information about testing or about vaccines, let alone about something that is more serious in nature, and that can be for individuals. So we hope that you can think of a time maybe in your own office or agency in your own time at work where you might have experienced something like this, or what comes to mind when you're dealing with individuals who are limited English proficient. And I do want to just mention that it's important to note that you don't necessarily have to have another type of form of language to be limited English proficient. You might just not, residents may not be able to communicate as effective enough to understand, again, how to access certain services. So it's really important to keep this in mind as you all are implementing your programming and services for all Denver residents. Next slide. And Claudia, I think you are up next.
Sorry, I'm trying to get my camera back on. There we go. Okay, so now we're talking about why do we need this toolkit? As we just saw in the video, it was very difficult for her to try to communicate and for them to understand that she needed assistance. So the toolkit is basically a guide that will help your agency, your office, your employees on how to actually provide meaningful access for limited English proficient residents that you serve. It'll serve as a guide for regulations that we've talked about, Title VI, Executive Order 131666, and we've talked about the ASL regulations as well. It'll help you with Denver thresholds, and it will also help you with determining what your individual thresholds will be for your program, benefit, or service that is offered, and determining vital documents. We do have a series of questions that help you determine what is actually a vital document, and hopefully that will ease the stress of thinking that you have to translate every single document that comes out of the office or your specific agency, how to actually implement and develop your language access plan, but more than anything else, to operationalize language justice so that our residents can get the information that they need in the language that they understand. So what exactly is a language access plan? We did talk about it in definitions, and it is no more than a management document that's going to outline how your agency, your office, specifically your employees, are going to do the meaningful access for LEPs. It's going to define how to include language access in planning and assign responsibility. I cannot stress enough about language access planning, including it in the beginning stage of your project or activity and so forth, instead of actually remembering about it or what's probably brought up when you're in the execution phase. It's a lot harder to try to allocate resources at that time. So again, you're going to hear us a lot on planning included in your planning. It'll help you allocate those resources adequately or determine that you need additional resources and document what those resources are. It'll help you provide language access services, as well as including the written notice of language access services. And we will talk more about the written notice, but it's also included in the toolkit, how you're going to provide training for your staff, and then how to continue to data collect, which will assist you in monitoring and evaluating your language access plan. So in talking about the four-factor analysis, the four-factor analysis is actually given to us by DOJ, and it's a method to determine in the end state after doing all four steps here, all four factors, will help you develop what your threshold is for languages in your geographical area or the program or activity project that is going to happen. So in the toolkit, and right now we will walk through how we did it for Denver. So the thresholds that I'll be showing you are actually for the county and the city of Denver. And we went through each one of these steps with different forms of data. And like I said, we'll go into a little bit more detail on them. But the first one is the number or proportion of LEP persons eligible to be served or encountered by the program. Number two is the frequency with which LEP individuals come into contact with your program. Number three being the nature and importance of that program. And four, what are the resources available to you and what's going to be the cost in order for you to be able to offer meaningful access. So the very first factor here, and I know just you're going to jump to the right side, so let me go ahead and explain that first. As the team talked about the safe harbor methodology that's given to us as well by DOJ, stating that we have to offer translation for populations over 1,000. So on your right side, you will see these are the most common languages that meet that 1,000 population. And as you can see at the bottom, it's taken from the American Community Survey. And we also have this link inside of our toolkit if you want to take a look at it. So this is the most direct data that you're going to see. If you're doing research for your activity or program, this is broken down into 5 different geographical areas within CCD. And again, you can take a look at that and see if that's something that could help you when you start doing your number one of trying to figure out what is the number of proportion of LEP persons eligible to be served or encountered. So in CCD, for 1,000 population, these are the languages. So again, other helpful things is including the LEP persons in your geographical area, who is directly affected of LEP communities of the program or services you're going to offer. And you can also review data from, again, federal, state, and local government agencies. This is one of them, which is the American Community Survey. But you can also reach out to the community and other organizations within your service area. You can also use internal and historical data, previous iterations of a very similar type of program. And that can be a key indicator on which languages you should be offering. Now, the only thing that I will ask is that you may not have internal data, you may not have historical data, and also if you've never had meaningful access to, let's say, the Russian population within your geographical area, your historical data may not show that, and that's okay. It just means that now with offering this information, you might have a higher response rate from the Russian community. So the second factor is the frequency by which LEP individuals come into contact with your program. So again, you'll see the chart on the right, and how we determine these languages is basically asking different agencies for their individual language data. So let me go ahead and share that with you. You will also have this in your in the toolkit, but let me go ahead and just show you. So again, on your far left side, we have the American Community Survey. Again, the most direct data because it's part of a survey. The information is there. Right now, all we have is 2019. 2020 has not come out yet. But then on the right side, you see that we have Denver Public Schools, we have Denver Human Services, we have OCA, we have the languages that the EOC use, 311, and I have 911. And again, we just queried a bunch of agencies that deal with the public and asked them what frequency the languages that they come into contact with. And that's how we were able to determine which languages are mostly encountered. So those are the ones that you see on the right side. So again, data collected can assist you and you can potentially use another agency's data if they're working in the same geographical area. And again, the historical data. But again, if you don't have historical data or historical data shows that potentially you're missing a population, you can always ask another agency or go back to all of the data that we've already collected for you. So the third factor is the nature and importance of the program. And again, if we truly want to meet one of Denver's main priorities and deliver an equitable and inclusive city, we have to think about who else is impacted. We talked about that word a lot. Who else will be affected? Who else is in my geographical area that may need assistance in understanding the program that I'm offering? Now, the chart on the right side, again, also comes from the American Community Survey. Now, these languages here do not meet the 1,000 population threshold that we talked about previously. But in our analysis, what we did find is that though a small population, they have a very high percentage of LEP residents within that population. As you can see, for Korean language, 55% of that population is LEP, along with the different percentages that you have here for the other languages. So if we are going to offer economic, education, benefits, housing, food, public safety, resources, etc., we also have to think about what is the nature and importance of our program and who else would be severely impacted if we neglected to provide them meaningful access. This is just a pictograph of understanding that if you do come across these languages, more than likely you are encountering an LEP. And again, it's important to remember when you're communicating with this population, with this LEP resident, that you might need language assistance services. So before I move on to the fourth factor, and the fourth factor is allocating resources and determining what your cost is going to be for your language access services for your program or activity, etc. I wanted to talk a little bit about the federal funds that the city receives, and just kind of talk about how this could be a potential resource for all of you who actually receive federal funds. So did a bit of research on usaspending.gov. Now, this does not include coronavirus relief funds or the American Rescue Plan Act funds, or partial or sub awards grants that we receive from the state. But for the total amount of fiscal year 21 grants, it's about $84 million. And again, I'm going to use this percentage as an example. If we allocated 5% of the 84 million, the city would have $4 million in resources for language access services. So as other examples that we see here, Host and Dido receiving different types of grant money. In doing your 4 factors and understanding what your cost is going to be, maybe a percentage of that could be used for your language access services. So again, the 4th factor, the resources available. What do you currently have that are available to you? What is going to be the total cost of your interpretation and translation services? What other resources what other agencies could you reach out to that you could request or partner with another agency for those language resources? So vital documents, again, something that has been a very hot topic with a lot of people that I talked about with language access. And a vital document is something that provides essential information for the services or benefits that your office or agency is offering to the public. It's critical information, it's medical emergency information, and it's a way that we determine what information or what documents actually have to be translated and in what languages. Again, after your 4-factor analysis, you should be able to determine the languages that you will have to translate these documents into. But just remember that this is a way that we ensure that LEP individuals and other residents with disabilities have the meaningful access that we talk about and effective communication for any kind of disaster preparedness, emergency information, but also services and benefits that are being offered. For those offices and agencies that fall under Title VI, that means that you receive federal funding. This is just an example of some of the types of documents that are vital. There is a complete list located in the toolkit. There's also other questions in the toolkit that help you analyze and determine if the documents that you're about to put out are in true vital or not. So for example, applications to any type of economic relief, housing relief, and so forth is a vital document. Any kind of programmatic forms that we talk about in receiving benefits, letters or notices, especially for those that may be information or data or the documents are still missing and they can't get a certain type of benefit, has to be translated into their preferred language. So the other question is, well, what if I'm not federally funded and I don't fall under Title VI? I will go back to, if we truly want to make the city inclusive and equitable for all of the residents that live here, then these are some of the type of questions that you can ask yourself, whether is this a vital document, and then should I actually be translating it? So again, this is just an example of some of the questions. There are more in the toolkit that help you walk through that. Again, remembering who can benefit from this service, what type of benefit, how large the impact is going to be if a certain population doesn't have access to the information. Are there LEP populations in your service area? The impact, and then what other unintended barriers in the program that could cause LEP populations not to apply for the service. So now we're actually going to talk about developing your own internal language access plan. We provide these tools inside of the toolkit, and there is an example of each one of them. So if you complete your self-assessment tool, and then the language access component checklist, you should be able to have all of the data necessary to plug into the template that we provided for you for your language access plan. So we're actually going to go into the toolkit. And right now, I just wanted to talk about a little bit of the steps that you're going to see outlined in the toolkit in order to do your language access plan. So you'll familiarize yourself with the program directives, and as we've talked about, the regulations, completing your self-assessment checklist, completing your FourFactor analysis. And I don't think I've stressed this enough, but you will have to do a language plan for each program, each benefit, each activity that you receive federal funds for. Even if the grant potentially services 4 different programs, you will need a language access plan for all 4 programs. So step 2B would be to complete your component checklist. And step 3, you should be able to have most of the information that you need to start drafting your language access plan. Step 4 is distributing language access assistance services information to the community. And that's actually letting them know that they have the ability and a phone number or a point of contact in order to request services if they need it. How to train your staff, and then also how you will be monitoring, evaluating, and updating your language plans. So let me start sharing. So now we're actually inside of the language access toolkit, and we're going to go and walk through a couple of the steps that we talked about. The very first one is, again, familiarizing yourself with program directives. And the team had talked about the link that was going to be in the toolkit for the federal agency language access plan. So again, if it's Department of Education, if it's Department of Labor, Department of Transportation, every single federal agency is required to have a language access plan, and you can find it at this link. What we have done is we've actually read and researched every single federal agency access plan, and our language access toolkit, if you follow the steps, you will be in compliance with every single federal agency there. But if you do want to see the individual access language access plan, this is a link for you. So step 2, you're going to complete your self-assessment checklist. It's also provided here for you. And then you're going to complete your individual FourFactor analysis. Now, it does walk you through it. And I also want to remind you that we've done this already for CCD, and the example of how to walk through that is in the first portion of this toolkit. But remember, it is the first factor being the number of people or proportion of LEP individuals that are eligible to be served or likely to be encountered. Second factor is the frequency. The third is thinking about the nature and importance of what you are offering. And the fourth would be, what are your resources available, and what's going to be the cost for you to be able to offer meaningful access and effective communication. Step 2B, you're going to build your component checklist, which again is the template is already embedded here for you. And then you do have a sample language access plan, which will be your step 3. So it is a template and most of it has been filled out. And then there's other things here that can help you and assist you in developing the language for that plan. So step 4, distributing language assistant services information to your community. Again, that is just notifying the community that you have this language assistant service and how they can actually access it. And that way they can, if they do have questions about a flyer or some type of community focused outreach material that they receive, they have a phone number, email, someone that can actually help them if they do want that information translated into another language. One of the biggest things is coordinating with other agencies and stakeholders inside of your geographical area in order to identify LEP residents. You may have done your 4-factor analysis and you may have done all of your research, but speaking to an organization that's actually boots on the ground will definitely help you understand the LEP residents there, the primary languages, if they actually need things translated or not, and other similar information in order to build your plan. Step 5 is determining how you're going to train your staff. How is everyone going to be aware that there is a language access program? And then how is everyone going to be aware that of the resources available and who to contact for those kinds of resources? So some things to think about. We do have some couple of questions here to kind of help you with how to actually work with your employees and work with staff and how they're going to work when they actually encounter an LEP individual. And then lastly, monitoring, evaluating, and updating the language access plans procedures. In order for the program to continue to be effective, one, you do have to collect data on the languages that you encounter the most inside of that program, or maybe a geographical area that will help you develop your follow-on plans or could help you modify the plan that you currently have. The one thing that I do want to highlight here is that while DOJ recommends an annual audit, at a minimum, it is required a biannual audit. What we found in researching the federal agency specific language access plans, that most of them recommend and require a biannual audit. Therefore, in order for us to be in compliance, then we would have to do a biannual review of each language access plan. And that would be done by the specific agency office in coordination with the language access coordinator. We do have some other tips on how you can potentially monitor the effectiveness of your program. It could be surveying employees, maybe surveying the LEP applicants or clients that come in, observation and how the interactions with LEP individuals are going, feedback and so forth, in order to be able to update your plan if necessary. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to PowerPoint slide. So again, we've gone through all of these steps and they are very detailed. And in the toolkit, you will find, like we just saw, a lot of examples and a lot of questions to help you go through each one of these steps in order to develop that language access plan. And I will hand it back to Ateem.
So I know that was a lot of information. And the question now might be, so what does this mean for me as an agency or an office? What we want you to do is review the toolkit. So we're going to send the toolkit out with this training recording and some of the data sets, just to understand and get a little bit familiar with what are the City and County of Denver demographics in terms of LEP residents, and what are some of the tools that might be able to help you in your specific agency or office understand some of your programmatic needs as it applies to LEP residents. Then we want you to conduct the 4-factor analysis for each program or activity. You're going to want to develop a language access plan, and know that all of this can be done with consultation, with the language access coordinator for that subject matter expertise. We don't expect you all to understand every single detail of the language access 4-factor analysis, but reach out. We want you to, again, take that ownership as a recipient of the federal funding, but know that you are not doing this by yourselves. We have a language access coordinator. We've developed a toolkit that really has a lot of resources, tools, templates for you to work on and work with to be successful. Next slide. So what does this mean in terms of our way forward? And we wanted to just give you an update on that way forward so you know that this is not the last time you see us. We hope to see a permanent position for a language access program manager, a language access planner, because we know across the city there's a lot of programming. Claudia just shared a slide about all the federal funding and the federal dollars that we'll be receiving as a city within our agencies and offices. And also we want to have someone to be able to organize and provide services through contracts and servicing as a coordinator. We want to hope to operationalize language access framework through an executive order. We want to continue to host monthly language access working group meetings with language access point of contacts from each agency or office. And most importantly, we want to also provide that, citywide technical assistance on language access assistance services, vendor selection, and community engagement. We don't want you to feel like you have to do this work alone. And we recognize that it's going to be a step-by-step process. It's not all going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. And so we hope that this toolkit is a good first step to understand what is needed, what are the requirements, and then working with our language access coordinator to help you continue to implement those steps, and working with our office to continue to implement those steps forward so that hopefully we can realize a robust language access program. We want to thank you all for your time. I wanted to especially thank Claudia, as well as one of our interns who has worked very hard, Courtney, on this toolkit, as well as the training. And thank you as the agency and office individual watching this training, as well as working through developing language access so that we can really be responsive for our LEP residents of the City and County of Denver. Thank you.